He's gonna ask what it is. This is for us, appreciation for what you do. You know what that means? Jeff, you know what that means? You don't have that next time we go to the pot.
Oh, you got a challenge?
Deal. Deal. Wow, thank you.
Hello.
Okay, how you doing?
One more minute.
Chris? Hey, Chris, you can hear us?
Right. Everybody wants to sit far away from the mic.
Really smart, I know. Kind of trying
We gotta put that in the notes, please bring.
Just a little cold, closed. It's not August, is it?
Yes, we did. At our house last night, our lawn was covered with hail.
We got a hail, so I
Yeah.
went to,
Like, that sounds weird. And we went outside, it's all white.
yeah. We have enough to go with start.
Yep. So no one.
All right, it's recording. Good. Yep. 7:01 as chair, I'll call this October 27th, 2025 meeting of the Issaquah Park Board to order. We'll start off with roll call. Ryan Olson, present. David Liu,
Present.
Katie Bell,
Excused.
Chris Kovac,
Present.
thank you. Tim Motley,
Here.
thank you. Anna Novakovic,
Here.
thank you. Diana Wren,
Present.
thank you. James Kushi,
Here.
thank you. Marlene Waxy,
Here.
thanks. Paula Dare. Martha Gaither,
Excused.
Jeffrey Newell,
Excused.
thank you. I don't think we have any voting action today, so. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting, which also included the park tour meeting? Notes before it. Do you have any corrections or edits? No corrections? On behalf of the board, the minutes are approved. Have public comment. I know we had a couple emails. We can address those shortly. But I do think we have in person.
I'm a resident of, we like to walk up and there's no comments. Here to
understand it right way.
Okay, that's great.
We might have, just wishing to speak.
David, you're.
Any comment?
I'm Dave Wagner, the word of monkey, so that I get a,
Why don't you come have a seat right here, David?
can I stand?
You can stand, you can, yes, absolutely. Glad you're here.
I've been on several boards in the city myself, as you well know. And I think it was 3 years ago that we came in, I think it was 2022.
Right.
We saw a little box on the plan that said relocate monument. And that caused all of us, my comrades, to take a little notice about the park board. We weren't sure if we were gonna use the M1 tank or F-15. We were gonna make sure that you knew that we existed. We didn't want that monument moved. It was a great night. We said our side. You promised us with your word that that monument wouldn't move, and it didn't. And we're very grateful. And we've also cleaned up the monument and got it spruced up, and it looks great. I've got a picture of it at night. And we're so happy about that. So I suggested to John and Bill and Brian that we come over tonight and we say thank you for not moving that monument. There's names on that monument that I know personally, and those are people who left Issaquah whatever year and never got an opportunity to come home. Skip never returned. His plane was blown out of the sky. We don't want them forgotten, ever. So, thank you for not moving that, and you have a challenge going now, so if we see you at the bar, you don't have that, you buy. Thanks again, Park Board, and it's been an honor, privilege, and a pleasure to get to know Robin and her wonderful husband and work through all that. And just so you know, the decision was made for Boy Scout, Eagle Scout project to keep that flag box and renew it and put it over there, because that's where Issaquah drops flags. And let me tell you little numbers. It's been there since 2006. And we, VFW, have probably, this is a guesstimate, retired, that's the correct word, right? Correct. Retired over 8,000 flags in the town that's been there for the city of Issaquah. And the parks folks put their flags in that box as well. So it's one of those little things that you walk by and you forget. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now, and thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Robin, and thank you, Parker, for keeping your word.
Thanks, David. I'd say a few words just to, again, thank you, VFW. Thank you so much for your care of that monument, and what you do and what you stand for. I hope for many, many years to come. And I know the park board, this is deeply meaningful to them, that plaza and now access to that monument is so much more improved. And I think there's more residents that recognize that monument is there. Like, where did that come from? It was always there. And so hopefully it's that much more accessible for all the residents of Issaquah for generations to come.
When VFW donated that to the city of Issaquah in 1947, I was 3 years old. And it's still here.
Yep.
And hopefully, long after I'm gone, it'll be here. And whenever anybody asks, who is Elizabeth Erickson? Somebody can't say it. I know her story. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much. That was awesome. Thank you. I think we got, I'm gonna go with Connie and CM online with their hand up.
Nailed it.
Connie with us?
Connie, can you hear us?
You guys, Connie's muted, looks like. She can unmute herself. It was fun to unmute.
Yeah. But checking, Connie, if you can't unmute yourself, apologies, with the Teams meeting, she should be able to.
It's me. Loud mic. I don't know if she has to, there.
I think you just took her out all the way.
Should, oh,
Do I make her
I
presenter?
think you, no, I think just Connie. Do one more opportunity here, and we can maybe circle back. City council meetings.
Put anything in the chat if she.
yeah, can you type in the chat if you're there? Oops,
And she's gone.
she just left. She might have
Oh, she might have
that
this.
connection thing. We'll
see if she pops back up. Oh,
She is. Connie, we see you're back.
There we go.
Hey.
You all just entirely disappeared. It's like all of a sudden you were gone. I could hear you, but anyway, so Connie Marsh, live on Squawk. I'm gonna start with the easy one, which is the city of Issaquah has never done a master plan. We have done master site plans. That's how we've dealt with our larger parks before. And so I am reluctant to have you go into a process that has never existed and we don't know what it is. Like, blah, here we're doing Tibbetts Valley Park. I would suggest that what you do is have a meeting or two saying, what is a master plan? What are the components that we need to have in a master plan to make sure that the community contract that you are creating actually can function in the future once everybody is off the committee and you no longer have the same staff. Because it's very different than the master site plans that you've had in the past. So then step number 2 is a little more holistic. And that is, we don't really have anybody in the city of Issaquah who is for the natural environment. What we have is we have a person who's dealing with trees, and we have people who are sort of about climate, and then we have rules and regulations that are supposed to sort of protect the environment. But when I look at the changes that they want to make in the climate action plan, it's very clear that there's no one who is actually responsible for protecting our environment. And the moving of code around saying that we actually have our tree plan does not have implementation rules, regulations, or even staffing. So I don't see how we are going to progress on the natural environment without somebody who's responsible. So you would say, wow, I would think the Parks Department would be the people who are responsible for their end of ensuring that their parks are environmentally protected. But what I find is when the Parks Department goes through their processes for our natural areas, they act much like a developer in that they're trying to thread the code needle so they get what they want. They don't ask, is it right to do this? Because I don't think it is. They just say, well, if we look at it just exactly this way, then we can do what we want. And this is happening with the dog park. We know that it was a garbage dump because I know the people who used to shovel the garbage in the garbage dump below the dog park. That is a stream with the intent that the code was built, but the Parks Department has pushed heavily to make sure that it is not going to be called a stream because they don't like the buffers that are allowed. The dog poopy water is going to go in curtain drains and then into what they're calling a bioswale, but that bioswale is a vestige of the train that used to run through there, and it's basically just filled with reed, canary grass, etc. And so, you can do it because our stormwater plan doesn't address dog parks and dog poop, but should you? No, you should not do that. And so I am calling conscience to this entire world of what people like about Issaquah, which is our natural environment, and saying, should we be doing things that we can sort of do? And that should be the judge when we're looking at our public lands and our parks departments. And I'm going to stop there before I get further in the weeds, and have fun. Bye.
Thank you, Connie. Appreciate it. All right, I think that is the end of our public comments.
But if I could add one thing, we did receive an email, you all received an email from Steve Pereira regarding some of his comments around both of tonight's topics, the master plan that we'll be talking about, and the Issaquah Climate Action Plan. He had some comments as well. So like we've done previously, we can add that email to the minutes that you'll, for this meeting that you'll approve next month.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you for that reminder. And with that, we'll move on to regular business. Up first, we have the Tibbetts Valley Park Master Planning Process, presented by Robin Spear. Well,
Yeah, as Robin is preparing to share screen, look at that. I'll give a quick overview. Thank you so much. We know, as we came out of our 2024 Park System Plan update, a revisioning of Tibbetts Valley Park, a master plan update of Tibbetts Valley Park was your highest priority. It was also a very high priority for City Council in the past 2 6-year capital improvement plans where they've identified and provided some funding to do this planning process. We thought tonight would be a great opportunity to discuss what a master plan is, talk about this process that we are going to map out and want to undertake. You'll notice as Robin gives you a review, 2 very distinct phases of this master plan process. Both are going to be really, really important. I won't bury the lead. Robin will go into this more, but one is site feasibility. So feasibility work to understand what's happening environmentally on that site. And once we really know that, we've done some initial work that you'll hear about, but there's some additional work we want to get done. We do that work first, and then we go into concept development, understanding and being informed with what's available, what's possible for the site. So tonight's intended, again, as an overview of what this master plan process is going to be. We invite questions and discussion as we go. Thanks, Robin.
So I have a question, just you touched on it just briefly, because when I went through this and you mentioned that it came out of the work we did last year about being a high priority from some of the park planning projects. And that had skipped my mind. My question really was, what unmet need does the planning process do? Why are we doing this? And then, why now? Why are we doing it now? And then maybe you just touched on that because it came out of the work we did last year. But could you just say a few more words about, why and why now?
Yeah. Again, I'll be super quick, and I think Robin will go into it a little bit more. The Central Issaquah Plan is an adopted document that has identified where Issaquah wants to put its density. Right, all cities are required to have a plan for where they're going to add population. And Issaquah adopted the central Issaquah plan. It basically said, hey, we want density in the downtown area, in the central Issaquah area. If you look at a map, Tibbetts Valley Park is right on the southern end of that central Issaquah plan. We've known for a couple of years now, and these are the conversations we've been having, is Tibbetts Valley Park has lived a wonderful life. It's a wonderful community park. It's tired. Its amenities are tired. We thought now is a very strategic time and a strategic moment, knowing we have a current population that is wanting to see that park reinvested in. We know we need to plan for future growth. We think this is a strategic time to cast a new vision for what Tibbetts Valley Park is. The reason we're doing a master plan, the reason we're looking at a park holistically, is we know we're not going to have the capital funding to do it all in one fell swoop. So you do a master plan to allow for that community vision to stand and to be important. And even as Connie says, to be a contract, or here's the direction, here's the North Star that this community would like the park to go. And then as capital funding is available, you're doing phases. You might do a couple phases. It might be 10 different phases, really depending on what funding looks like. So getting that vision, getting that big picture vision for this community park, knowing its neighborhood is going to change. It's going to be asked to perform in different ways, but it's also has some real ecological and environmental treasures, some resources on this site that need to be protected. And so let's understand those. Let's be realistic and pragmatic about how we achieve both. Yes, we have to act like a developer sometimes in the park department, but we don't see ourselves as developers.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
We'll dig into a little bit of that detail more
Yeah.
later on. But yeah, so for the past month, Jeff, Rick, and I have been working on what we call a request for qualifications, or an RFQ, that we'll send out to the public to garner interest from consultants that want to be able to do this master planning process. So this is kind of the first step, but we thought right now it'd be a good idea to walk you through the process, what's going to happen, get your feedback if we're starting off on the wrong foot or on the right foot, but to let you know what's going to be coming up next year. So that'll be going out early November. Just a quick schedule for that. We hope to have interviews by January and under contract then by late January, early February. So we're hoping to start the whole process early, very early next year. We anticipate 6 to 9 months. Again, that depends on how detailed our feasibility is going to be, and then our public outreach, what that strategy is going to be. So, but first, I kind of want to give you a history of Tibbetts Valley Park. One thing that we want to be very conscious of now and in the future as we go through the process is that before even pioneers and early settlers were there, of course, the Native Americans were there. So we want to pay homage to and be respectful that they have been here since time immemorial, and they very much relied on this site and the landscape for fishing, for hunting, for gathering, and for trade. And that isn't something that just happened in the past. They're also interested in that in the future now. It's very much a part of their cultural, it's very significant to them, and because the creek does tie in to Lake Sammamish, it's even more significant because of the fish potential coming up the creek. But as we move in to the late 1800s and early 1900s, settlement from the pioneers started happening and the landscape started to be transformed. It's still used, or it was used, as early travel connections, mainly between the mining communities of Newcastle and Renton, which you can still see as SR 900. You can still see that connection today. It became a real key for north to south connection, particularly from Lake Sammamish down to southern Issaquah. And as you can tell, this picture is from 1936. It's probably the oldest aerial that we have available, but you can tell that there are agricultural activities that grew with the population. And the site was more than likely farmed and utilized for food. We can assume that probably hops were on the site. That was a big agricultural crop in the area. And then today, the site remains as a crossroad between Renton and the northern portion of Issaquah. We still have a very large environmental benefit with the creek and the riparian area, and the wildlife is capable to cross the site. And also now we have the recreation benefit also with different programming elements there. That kind of leads into my second slide. So this is what it looks like today. We have 5 baseball, softball fields, 1 playground with a shelter, 2 parking areas, a skate park, which I think is the most current element that was added in, 4 tennis and pickleball courts, the manor, of course, a barn that we use for maintenance and operations, several walking paths, and of course our natural features that are significant on the site, the Tibbetts Creek, all the vegetation. We have a little bit of slope on the southeastern side, and of course the riparian buffer there. So a lot of elements going on right now, a lot of elements living together, but we want to be able to harmonize those better in the master plan. So next, kind of to answer your question, Tim, why does it matter that we do a master plan? And master plans are very common in several different cities and counties. It's a typical form of developing a design, a conceptual design that you can take forward. Again, if we end up switching staff, that still remains that guiding document that the community develops. So it's kind of solidifies that idea more, no matter who's here. So, and just to reiterate, master plans are guiding documents. They are not construction documents. They are high-level conceptual plans, again, based on community feedback, community input, and the needs for the community. So some elements, mostly the programming elements, will remain. Locations may switch a little bit, but I feel like if we do a really in-depth feasibility study, we'll have a really good idea of where those elements can be. This master planning process, like I said, is going to be comprised of 2 phases. We'll have our feasibility study first, and I like to do that first and get a really good idea of the capabilities of the site. And then once we have that done, we'll move into concept development. We'll be preparing the plans and doing more public outreach. This helps us develop that balance between recreation, access, and ecology, which we talked a lot about last year during the park system plan update, especially our goals and policies and our core values. So this is going to be a litmus test for those and see how well we can do that. It'll help ensure responsible use of the public land and public funds. It encourages and reinforces sustainable design and the protection of natural features. You know, like Connie said, we do want to protect the habitat areas, the creeks, and improve them where we can. This will introduce phasing to help alleviate funding challenges. This is a very large site, so you can anticipate that it'll be a significant investment. And it's absolutely necessary for grant funding, again, which will more than likely have to go out for to help implement all the phases. So we can't get grant funding without the master plan. Okay, what is being studied? So the 2 different phases, the feasibility study phase. So we want to look at our foundation and context analysis would be our boundary, the basics. Let's look at our boundary. What easements are there? What restrictions do we have on the site? That's kind of the core basic that you start with. Then we're going to be looking at site characteristics, the topography, the vegetation. That's going to tell us a lot about what is capable and what's not capable, or what do we have to mitigate for. We'll look at existing facilities, such as utilities. What utilities are available either in the surrounding streets or on the site itself, because that can, again, help either exasperate or help us funding wise. Operations and maintenance. A plan isn't successful really unless we can operate and maintain it to the level that we want to our level of service. Social aspects, we'll be looking at social connectivity, connectivity within the park, connectivity to the surrounding neighborhoods and beyond to make sure that we're meeting that need. Again, that's a creeks to peaks connection. We want to make sure this park is well connected. Then we need to look at, because we do have environmental concerns, city, state, federal codes and regulations. I want to have a really good idea before we go into any construction and by the end of the master planning process, what agencies that will need to permit for, which I think is really critical because that really impacts our time frame. Once we finish that, and during that process, we'll also be going out for public engagement and public feedback. So we're not going to be doing this in the silo or in our bubble. We'll definitely be coming back and forth for more interest. The second phase would be the conceptual plan phase, which is kind of the fun phase in a way. Once we have that feasibility study, we want to come in with a very transparent study basically and mapping. So we are kind of diving into pie in the sky ideas that just the site isn't capable of holding. We'll look at program and development based on feedback and needs. So that's what everybody kind of, the fun part, what elements, what recreation elements, what pathways, connections, definitely circulation and connectivity. Environmental and sustainability will be a big portion of that. Then once we have those, layer those on, we'll look at moving into the concept plan and development. So it's very iterative, it's back and forth and back and forth. But by the end of the process, we'll go probably from 3 plans or ideas down to 1 preferred plan. And then we want to definitely look at phasing and order of magnitude costs, because that's going to help us determine what step we need to go through first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good questions. First of all, a couple of years ago, when we had that tranche of money and we were trying to decide where to spend it, this was one of the areas that we looked at. And there were several proposals about what to do there, along with several other areas. And so will that be used as a basis or at least a starting point for, what we're going to do there? Or will it be starting from scratch?
But I believe the tranche of money you're referring to is the ARPA money, the federal.
Yeah, the money that went into the
Pedestrian park.
yeah,
and
yeah,
senior center
exactly, and
plus.
the Veteran Center and all
Yeah.
that, but there were several, this was one of the finalists along with that. And there were some suggestions and ideas about how we might spend the money there, which seems like a good starting point because we kind of mapped out what needed to be done or could be done.
I see what you're saying. Yes, I think ideas that have been discussed for Tibbetts Valley Park will certainly be part of that. They will be a baseline for some of that public engagement around conceptual phase development. We won't just start from scratch. Hey, we've talked to the community before. We've talked to the park board before. Here's some elements that have been discussed.
Okay.
I think we even had concepts at one point, and that wasn't even for the ARPA, that was even before that.
That was prior to ARPA, right? That was
Like,
exactly.
Chris and I, like way back.
Yes, in 2019, you're right. Yeah, and some of that concept development will also be sort of brought forward. I think, again, the site feasibility is going to be really, really important because that is, again, wasn't necessarily fully done as those concepts were created. So
Yeah, but we've done some of that, so we're not starting from scratch.
exactly.
And my second question or comment that is not in here, one of the really cool things about Tibbetts is the osprey nest. Like you've been down there with the young ospreys squawking and carrying. It's cool. So, I think it's worth mentioning somewhere along the line that you're going to try to preserve natural elements such as the osprey nest. And I'm also wondering, does that present any kind of regulatory hurdle to doing development there? I don't know if ospreys are protected or what have you, but you've got a well-established nest there. It's been there for many years. Is that something that has to be taken into consideration?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That is clearly a site characteristic. Yes, it's a natural nest and an unnatural asset. It's on a light pole. It's on a light pole.
Yeah.
So we will.
But there's a platform.
But that is and the platform is intentionally put there,
Yeah.
so it can coexist and not interfere with the lights. And so absolutely, that is an element that'll be part of this work.
Yeah, because I'd hate to see that get disrupted.
Yeah.
That's just really
No,
cool.
great point.
Hannah has a question.
Oh,
Hi, Hannah.
Hey guys, I have a question kind of about the planning process in general. And I'm sorry if this is kind of an ignorant question, but this master plan, I understand is, supposed to help us for many, many years. Given how long it takes, right, to complete and implement this master plan, again, assuming this is going to take an extended period of time. I was just wondering, how do you ensure that it's adaptable, right? Is there some kind of framework in place to like revisit it or to adjust it as community needs change, or even as like the environment kind of changes, right? We saw with the bomb cyclone, right? Like we have these environmental changes that are happening too. So is this plan adaptable, and is there a way for us to revisit it even after it's been accepted?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's a great example of resiliency and sustainability we want to put into the plan. So yes, again, Robin said it well when she said this is intended as a guiding document, right? I think I referred to it as a North Star. It's not intended to be an absolute because of the very questions you raised. I mean, it's intended to certainly not just be willy-nilly, but it has to be understood that actual design, the work done in any given phase will likely have a degree of community engagement involved in it, so that you're really drilling into some of the details that might be missing or might be spoken to, or ideas are spoken to in the master plan. Yeah, it's not meant to be so finite that we're trying to build a park in 2026 for a phase that might be done in 2036, without pausing and saying, hey, community, in 2036, does this still ring true? What elements might need to be shifted? So trying to cast a broad vision. If that broad vision is so successful and there's a funding strategy and benevolent donors that give enough money that it can all be constructed in 2028, then great, right? It's intended to be adaptable that way too. Yeah, it's maybe slightly different, as Connie says. If master plans of a park of this size are different than what's been done before, this does represent something a little bit different. But I can tell you, within the park profession and within many municipalities and counties, as Robin has said, this is a best practice, is to something this big, at least understand the big picture and then even if you're doing minor improvements, you're doing minor improvements that are working towards the bigger goal. So Hannah, does
I
that?
know.
Great question. Yes, it's meant to have some adaptability to it.
That really helped. Yeah, thank you for further giving me context and like kind of understanding what this master plan is. It sounds like it's meant to inherently be flexible. So that's fantastic.
Can I add one more thought? Flexible with some degree of limits, right? That if suddenly Tibbetts Valley Park was wanting to become the municipal dump, we don't have one, but I'm just going to make it up, right? Or it's some completely different. There's a limit to what that flexibility is. Or hey, we want to plop a building now in the middle of Tibbetts Valley Park. We want to build some guardrails around this master plan. Ultimately, something that's recommended by you. We're preparing to assume this master plan goes to city council for adoption. So there's a resolution or ordinance that builds some of those, hey, it's flexible to a limit, but it's also rigid to try and make sure this remains a community asset, a community park that the residents want.
Just a quick follow-up to that, Jeff. Is it typical in these kinds of, like when you're working with, a consulting firm, putting a plan like this together, would it be typical to have some kind of, to your point, like, change management process or like decision protocol or like, just something like those guardrails? Would that be something that would be, typical to that a consulting company might put in with the services that they
Good
provide?
question. I don't know. I don't know that there's a typical, I don't know that the consulting firm does that. I think we as a city do that.
Okay.
Right? That's like your work as residents, our work as staff working for you, that as this goes to council, hey, here's,
There's some kind of.
here's the, right, here's the limits, or here's the, yeah.
And that's where we can lean on the zoning as well. The zoning really does restrict us about what we can and can't do there. So we know
You're right,
this
there are other
is zoned here.
guardrails
Yeah.
that exist already.
This helps.
Yeah.
Okay, another benefit is how will community input help shape the plan? And first, we're gonna start off with our reinforcing our 2024 park system update plan, specifically our goals and policies. This was reiterated quite a bit, as you all know, you were part of that. And we're looking to the comprehensive plan also as our baseline, as well as the previous master plan and all the other work that was done. Site feasibility study and community input will really shape the master plan together. Again, we want to come in as transparent as possible with a feasibility plan, letting people know what our opportunities and constraints are on the site, because that's really going to direct us a lot about what we can and can't do. We really want to hear how residents are currently using the park right now. What do they like? What do they not like? What features would they like in the future? And what concerns they have. Again, we're hearing a lot about environmental concerns, about preservation and protection. So that's something we're definitely going to be incorporating. We'll have surveys, we'll have open houses, workshops, online mapping. We really want this to be a robust process. We want to make sure as many of our 40,000 residents can be heard and they have a say in what we're going to be developing. Yeah.
There was a lot of feedback given the last time on Tibbetts in particular, so we'll start to Tim's point. We'll start with that as a
Okay.
grounding, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
plan.
Yep.
Right.
It's a plan.
And because of all the potential development that's been going on, we want to factor that in and see if we can hit any disadvantaged community or any communities that we didn't hit before, that we know we need more.
Yeah, there's a couple multifamily projects that are planned and in permitting that are going to be across the street. So it's taking what we've heard and adding, yeah.
We know this input will inform trade-offs for TVP. We know we have a lot of competing interests there. So we want to hear from the community what priorities are, what we want to move forward, what we want to protect, what we want to integrate together. Because there really is a lot that we can do to start integrating and really enhance habitat there while still making it functional. There's a lot of new technologies out there that we want to investigate and see what's feasible and what we can afford to. Okay, so this I just put together kind of an iterative process of what we can do for community outreach. And I'd love your feedback at the end if we need to do something different or what you have found has worked in the past or worked with a past master plan. First off, definitely a kickoff and a project introduction to the community. Much like we're doing right here. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? What is our process going to be? Schedule, what the workflow and our milestones are going to be. So we want to remain flexible in that process to see if we need to hit something else or do something else or kind of switch gears depending on what is and isn't working. Okay, we do want to have focus groups and meetings Again, a lot of competing interests, so we want to make sure we hear from all the groups, the user groups that currently use the park and would like to use the park, along as individuals, definitely kids. You know, kids can help shape a lot of the plan. Seniors, we have a large senior community with more coming up, so we want to make sure that we're providing enough activities, outdoor activities that will meet their needs. And again, disadvantaged groups. We'll have online meetings and surveys, of course. We've done some online meetings before. The survey was very successful for our system plan updates. We'd like to do that again. Again, and be as transparent with our graphics and our mapping to help people understand the process and understand how they can provide input. Boards, commissions, and council meetings. We'll definitely be coming back to you several times during the process, as well as other boards and commissions, and of course, a council meeting. So lots of other, not only public outreach, but we can have public input during those meetings as well. And again, it's an iterative process. We'll be pulling from all those meetings, and those should help us set all the priorities.
One quick add, Robin, you know, given the scale of this project, I know in the last couple of years, we've had some success creating ad hoc committees within the park board. This might be a project that would be a really good candidate to have an ad hoc group. It can work a little more frequently, and then you all are part of coming back and telling the full park board what's been going on. So something for us to think about.
Right. And just as basically, this is a typical way that I've done my master planning processes, and that I've seen other cities and counties do their process. But so again, this is all based on community feedback during the engagement process. But we'll start off after that introduction meeting. We'll get some ideas rolling. We'll come back to the community with what we call conceptual plans, 3 to 5. Usually you start with bubble diagrams, the big ideas, big locations. And again, that feasibility study is going to help us move those around. Where we'd like to locate programming elements. What programming elements do we want? So you start off with a lot of ideas and start narrowing it down as you work through the process. The next would be preliminary plans, 2 to 3 plans. And again, it depends on how much feedback, how much consensus, what our priorities are. Typically, you come back with 2 plans there. And then after that, we move into the preferred plan, which is usually one plan that has all the preferred elements. It's not the final, but it's one of your final chances to give feedback on what you like and what you don't like in the plan. And then we'll come back for a final master plan, which is it's the feasibility study, it's our conceptual plans, all pulled together in one report. So you can see how the entire process informed our final concept plan. And this is just a general timeline that we were looking at. So first, we'll start off with the RFQ, the request for qualifications to bring in a consultant. We'll do our feasibility study, 7 to 9 months. I mean, this is a very large, very complex site. So I want to give it a little more time to get as much information as we can. We'll start the master planning process, which is design and community outreach. And again, some of these may overlap and inform each other and go back and forth. Next, we'll move into the preliminary concepts, a few months for that. And again, knowing our meetings and everything we have to attend and timeframes, that schedule's going to shift and move a little bit. After the preliminary, we'll come into preferred concepts, then our final concept, which is our final master plan report, and then go to council for. So roughly 12 to 18 months for the whole process. And again, that's going to flex depending on if we want additional ad hoc routes or we feel like we need to go out to the community to get more feedback and information.
Good effort.
Yeah, huge effort. So questions we had for you. What are the board's expectations for the master planning process now that we've walked through a little bit of that? And what does success look like to you for the master plan?
I have a question. So this has to do with what does it look like to you? Because I'd like to know what your vision is in terms of the final plan. There's going to be multiple elements, right? There's different things. And would the final plan be such that it's prioritized that we need to do this first, then do this, and then do this? But what if there's only money to do number 3 right now? Do we save the money until we get enough to do number 1? Or you just see what I'm getting at? Do you do the elements piecemeal, or do you try to do them sequentially depending on the priority they are given in the plan? Or how does that work, Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you might have to do A before you can do B, right? So it's a great question, Tim, but it's hard to answer. I don't know that it can be that prescriptive. I think I've certainly found in my experience, sometimes for the want of doing something in the exact order, you may not be able to get to step 4 and 5 because step 1 is so much money and it's taken a long time to get there, right? And so I think as we go through this process, as we hear your priorities, as we hear the community's priorities, I think we'll get an understanding of what is truly most important. As we get an idea of the cost estimates and start to put dollar numbers to those, we're hopeful that conversation helps to inform that. You know what I mean? And again, having we don't know what we don't know. We're going to know more as we get to the end of this. There might still be levels we don't entirely know, right? Hey, what's the funding strategy? How's the funding going to come together? That we'll just have to see when we get to that point. So that's a pretty loose non-answer, other than I don't think we want to be try and be so prescriptive, because that could be really limiting.
Yeah, so the decisions on where to put a tranche of money will have to be made at the time the tranche of money is available.
Correct. How much money is it?
Yeah.
How much money is it? And where is that where could that be best invested in this vision that the community's
Rather
put
than
together?
having something that's sort of written in a very rigid fashion. We have to do this first. And then, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And during the process, we may find we want to go and do a constructability review to see what makes sense. If we're doing phase 1, do we do the utilities for phase 2 at that time to save the money? So we don't have to go dig up phase 1, things like that, I think would be pretty helpful to do too.
Okay.
That'll give us a better idea.
Dan, did you have a comment question?
Yeah, kind of related to what's being discussed. Robin, you said that the concept and the execution are going to be separate things, and the master plan kind of details things at a high level, without necessarily concerning itself with the details of the execution. Would there be the potential to kind of revise the concept as material issues arise, for example, related to funding or whatever is being discussed? Like, Jeff, you're saying there's all these unknown unknowns, but as those unknowns become known, does that affect the master plan or feed back into it?
Certainly what I've seen done before is you can do an amendment to the master plan as well. If it's a significant enough change, we can look at that. But usually during the design process, you are going to get into the details much more, as you're moving into construction documents about what is feasible and what isn't feasible.
Mm-hmm.
And again, funding plays a large portion, plays into that quite a bit. That may scale us back, that might move us forward a lot more. We don't know yet. But this will help us kind of stick our toe in the water and take a temperature of what we're capable of doing.
Yeah, another thing go ahead, Diana. Sorry, go ahead.
Is there any possibility for elements of the master plan to be funded by money that's not part of the parks budget? And I'm thinking of like transportation budget for bike paths and stuff like that, or is that not a consideration?
Well, it's very much a consideration. I mean, as we put a funding strategy together, if there is, stormwater work that we want to do with the creek and other things, we will work with our stormwater partners and seek stormwater grant funding. If there is, as you said, safe routes to schools funding, and we could show that, wow, a pathway through the park, getting people to the middle school or getting students to the middle schools easier. We're gonna seek funding that aligns with the amenity or the type of work that's being done in the park. Absolutely.
And we've already started out high-level discussions with the other departments, letting them know this is coming up. What can we coordinate together? What do you guys have coming up? Yeah, and seeing how we can collaborate on some of those ideas, which is great. Yeah, Jane?
I was gonna take a stab, at least from my perspective, on the first question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I think for me, a lot of what you've been talking about is great in terms of transparency, gathering community feedback. I think for me, when we did that field trip to Tibbetts Valley Park, I've lived in Issaquah for, it's gonna be 20 years next February. No, is that right? Yeah, 20 years next September. And I didn't even know it was there. And so that was the first time I even was aware that there wasn't Tibbetts Valley Park. And so I think as we, in the community feedback gathering process, I'd love for, more people, I'd love for it to be, I kind of see some concentric circles in my mind, like starting with Tibbetts Valley Park, and really make sure we give people in the immediate area like chance after chance after chance to give feedback. But I'd also love to see it, I know we want to get feedback broadly, but like, I'd love to see, I live in Old Town now. I'd love for people in Old Town like me who, didn't get the email that there's a Tibbetts Valley Park to be like, oh, wow, there's this park here. And, so for just the visibility of the park too.
Yeah, there's an education element to the outreach as well. Did you know that this is an important
that this
community
is
park?
here for this work and, so anyway, so for me, that's what I would say. And then success for, I would, part of what I mean, I'm a new board member, but part of what I love about this has been, about being on this board, has been that you all have given us the context to contribute successfully to the topic at hand. So I think like that for me makes me feel a lot more confident to contribute well to this team and to this effort. So, that's a yes, and keep doing what you're doing, and thank you for doing it. So,
Team deal. Yeah.
I think my comment might be somewhat related, and that's that you guys are the experts. So I agree with we need community feedback, of course.
Yeah.
But you guys know how the system works in total and not just Tibbetts. So an expectation I have for this planning is that we keep in mind the total system and what the needs of the system is. So I'll use baseball as an example, right? Like we might have people come in who never play baseball or don't know it exists or whatever, but it's very important to that park. So we need to make sure that we know, like, hey, we're maybe getting rid of some of the fields up in, Highland, at that central park, and this field's too big, and this only fits 9 to 13-year-olds. Like, the community is not necessarily going to know that in the depth that I expect the park team to know that. And so for me, my expectation is obviously community feedback is super important, but that you guys are the experts and that we have very strong parameters on the uses for this space need to be.
No, really appreciate that, Marlene. And your comment has encapsulated why the park strategic plan and the park system plan update are so important to understand the entirety, the goals of the whole system. So as we start to do planning for a specific park, that context really, really matters. Hey, if we do this or we don't do this here, what's going to happen system wide?
Yeah, so we're going from like 5 fields to 3. I think people, but maybe we'll do that. What does that look like and where are we mitigating those fields or how are we managing that? That would be a big part of what I'll be looking for over the course of the year. And then I'm just super excited, obviously, because you guys haven't been to Tibbetts since 2018. So here we go again.
Yeah, I'd piggyback on that maybe just a little bit. Be the same exact specifics, but just said in a different way is, like, as you're outlining what this master plan could be is, thinking about or putting to paper for other people to see currently there's this many programmed activities at this field, these times of the year. If we have a plan that has this is how many activities you can have. Opportunities for revenue is here, opportunities for revenue is here, and seeing those laid out. I think the only other thing I'd ask potentially for the master plan is if there's a secondary strategy that involves any potential expansion. If that happens, what would phase 2047 when you get like?
That's a really good point.
And just to pick up on what's been shared, I think what I'm hearing is what's important to me. Success looks like to me with specific, what are the SMART goals, right? Something that's very clear so someone can look at it and pick it up. And I'm not saying you would, but it's going to be nice. No, it's going to be, X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And so have it planned out so that it's very clear what was identified as a need, what the remedies are going to be. This is what we're going to do, rather than something that's a little softer.
Yeah. All really, really good feedback. Really good feedback. Thank you. I think an example of that, of trying to measure an outcome, is we've heard this in various forms here with all of you and the community feedback. Tibbetts Valley Park right now it's lived a great life. It's a really important park. But on a day that there's not scheduled activities, the park doesn't perform very well. The park performs really well when it has a lot of scheduled activities. And we've heard, and think about that, as more residential comes around this park, a true community park is good at both. A true community park is vibrant when there's unscheduled activities and it's just being used for drop-in. And also it can handle scheduled activities. So I think a metric or a measurement that we're going to want to look at as we're engaging with the community, and something we've already heard, again, we're not starting at zero, is right, how do we measure unscheduled vibrancy, right? How do we measure that, hey, this is a park we're wanting to feel like it has use and energy on a cold November day when there's no baseball games. And that's a community park that's performing really, really well, right? Because it can do both. It can do both things. So
Just to clarify, when you say performing well, is that what you're talking about, use when? People just
exactly.
like-
Right. Performing, it's serving the community. It's serving a degree of needs and daily uses that, man, when there's X number of games scheduled, the park's, again, handling that. But when there's nothing scheduled, there's not just two people in the park, right? It's doing more. As a community park, because it's this classification of park as a community park, it's expected to do more than an open space parcel.
With some space, if it has full slate ball games scheduled Saturday and Sunday, isn't it appropriate to give the space a breather, to try to have it acknowledge that there'll be times when there's gaps, when it's not being used heavily, basically to give the land a breather, so there's not that constant use.
Well said, Jim. No, I think we're saying the same thing. When I say perform, we're not burdening it with schedule. We're giving it reprieve, but when it has reprieve, it's not going from 0 to 100. It's not going from, a quiet day at Tibbetts Valley Park right now is very few people. you know, what it would look like if a quiet day was still a couple hundred people that were coming to use a vibrant play area and a really cool loop trail and an educational kiosk and boardwalk or lookout over Tibbetts Creek, right? You know, so it's quiet community park use, but it's still, it has energy. And so I'm probably diving way too into details, but
I love that. I think a place to, like, that I think of when I think of Central Park.
Mhm.
Central Park is busy as all get out when it's scheduled, but it's also really busy
It's a good-
just generally. So like if you're kind of looking or want to see, like that's a place where if you go on like a Saturday afternoon, even like it's partially rainy, like there's kids out there playing, there's people running, you know, like there's a lot of just stuff happening there, and that we're gonna have as much, if not more density.
Mhm.
Right, coming.
And both are community, both are classified as community parks.
I think that's a good
It's a good
list, necessarily. That park's always busy, whether it's scheduled or not.
And that's why this site feasibility is so important, because we really need to understand what, and I'll be honest, I think Tibbetts Valley Park has really important natural environment, natural resource things happening on this site that we have to steward. That's a little different than Central Park. And so, you know, that site work is important. You know, a community park needs to fit the canvas that it's in. Right, and so, yeah, all of these are really, really important goals, and there's no way around it. We're gonna be threading a needle, and you know, site work like this is it takes time and it takes thought, and we're gonna hear different opinions, and we're gonna hear and listen to those different opinions. If we've learned anything from Hillside Park, as you've gone through that process, hopefully you realize that our goal as staff is to not create winners and losers. Our goal as staff is to hear some really divergent opinions and work towards a public space that tries to do multiple things and fit the site. Tibbetts is going to be that as well. So here we go. Buckle up.
Did you have any other questions? I know we had 3 other bullet points, but any questions on the feasibility or conceptual plan phase?
Where did the comments about AstroTurf come from that came up about, was it one of the write-ins? Somebody was talking about, I don't want to, you know, we shouldn't be putting AstroTurf or.
It's
I'm like, I didn't see that anywhere. Where did that come from?
Oh, it's been discussed at Tibbetts Valley Park. It was discussed before I arrived in 2016. It's been discussed in my time here. I think as we've talked athletic fields, we've talked about that balance of, hey, when you're as land constrained as we are as a city, how do we build a ton of grass fields, or do we concentrate and have multi-use synthetic turf fields? So the idea of synthetic turf has been talked about at Tibbetts Valley Park, and nothing has been decided or definitive. Yeah, Steve, I think, wrote that in his public comment, his email, and we're going to hear that. We're going to, you know, that's going to be another example of what are the trade-offs? What are the pros and cons? And again, what's feasible? That feasibility study is really, really important. Understanding the hydrology that's happening throughout that site will help us. Hey, as we consider synthetic turf, here's what we're going to need to do to make synthetic turf happen.
It's previously been talked about. That's why I didn't remember that. I hadn't heard it. I'm like,
Mhm.
Right, so this is back to the first question too, and kind of about, you know, your guidance to us to. I could, you can table me if this isn't the right form for it, but I would love some guidance as we're gathering back, and even just like the 2 emails that we got this week. is the protocol to say, you know, to kind of say, thank you for the feedback, if there's like, I guess I need some guidance about what to do when you hear feedback that is just either coming from left field or somebody is like saying up and down is down is, you know, up is down and down is up, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do we,
Yeah, Jay, that's,
you know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
no, I
Like,
think I know what you're asking. And I'd say that's probably a much longer conversation than we have tonight.
Yeah.
So,
but I guess as we go through this, guidance like that, well, you don't have to answer it tonight, but I mean, like, guidance like that would help me because like, you know.
real quickly, I think all public feedback is important and is valued. And I don't hear you saying it's not. We're gonna hear a lot, just much like we heard a lot from Hillside Park. As a advisory board, you're not asked to go that alone.
Yeah.
Right? We really are, again, as an advisory group to the mayor and to council. It's our job to work with you all and do this together and navigate this together, so.
I don't know if that.
We
Anybody
can't
else?
have a Parks Board discussion on email. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's not-
There's that too.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
that too, right?
It's not as well. It just is more like, you know, we just live, it feels like sometimes we live in an age of misinformation. And as we're, and like, I don't know if, you know, I, as we go through this, I could just use some guidance about like, I don't want to say to a resident, what are you talking about? That's not, you know what I mean? But I know myself enough to say that. So just,
Okay, you got it. Looking at time, I think thank you. I think this has really been very, very helpful. Again, we'd love to hear, you know, any other closing thoughts or comments. Want to give ample time for our next topic as well.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's a robust conversation. Excited to see next steps on that. Our second piece of regular business is the Issaquah Climate Action Plans update. Stacy McKinstry.
Perfect. Happy to have Stacy here. Welcome, Stacy.
Thank
Yeah.
you for making time for me. Stacy McKinstry. I am the sustainability manager with the city, so we sit within the executive department. So tonight I'm just going to give you an update on our climate action plan. It is nearing 5 years old, which is when it was envisioned it would be updated. And we've been going through a process over the last several months that will continue up through next spring. In order to update that, this is our first touch point with you. I think we'll probably plan on coming back in early 26 to focus in on a couple of specific areas. So tonight, really, the intention is to make you aware of the process that we're going through to update the plan, and then to have that very initial conversation around some early feedback we received on the natural systems actions. So tonight, I'll just walk through our progress to date, how we're approaching the update, the recommendations that we got from a committee, and I'll explain how those committees were formed. Luckily, we have 2 members of the committee here, and then really want to open it up for conversation around a few topics related to the update. Kind of a limited set of questions for you all tonight. So first, as a bit of background, just wanted to talk to you about the climate action plan. Since we don't come here regularly, I know we've had a couple of joint meetings with the environmental board, but I don't think any of those have been focused on the plan. This is what I spend most of my time doing. So it was adopted in December of 21, and we are well underway in implementation. The plan sets targets and identifies actions for both reducing greenhouse gas emissions as well as preparing for the impacts of climate change. We have 6 what we call focus areas within the plan. Those are things like buildings and energy, natural systems and water resources, land use and transportation, And we have been working to implement actions within all of those areas over the last few years. We are a small team. It is myself, one other full-time staff person, and then we do bring on fellows or interns throughout the year. But then, of course, we work across all the departments at the city to really implement this work, as well as with a number of community partners. So in terms of how we're doing so far, we're actually making great progress in terms of implementing the actions as written in the plan. We have about 90% of the actions we are moving forward. They're either done, they're well underway, moving forward as expected, or they're underway maybe with some really minor delays or hiccups, but moving forward. We have a number of both internal programs within our own city operations, as well as community-based programs underway. So for example, within city operations, we just finished installation of 19 EV chargers. I'm actually right in the back of this building, transitioned a number of city vehicles, CEVs, and have been working with our facilities teams on a bunch of building upgrades. And then at the community level, we run programs such as a heat pump program for households with low income, as well as just the market rate program. We run solar campaigns, and then we work with our commercial buildings to help them meet energy efficiency standards. We've also been very successful with grants. You are not living and breathing this every day. There is the state's Climate Commitment Act, which is essentially a cap and trade program. That program generates a lot of revenue, and a lot of that is distributed through grants. So we've been very successful in securing a number of those grants. So that's kind of all the good news. But one of the things we're noticing as we implement the plan is while we have so many actions underway, a lot of great programs and projects, we're actually falling short of a lot of our bigger targets. So in terms of reducing our overall gas emissions, as one of the examples. For natural systems, our target is around our 55% tree canopy. We'll talk about that in just a minute. So as we go into this plan update, we know a couple of areas that we want to focus on. One is really to hone in on buildings, and the other is transportation. Those are our biggest emission contributors. So in terms of updating our plan, the Issaquah Climate Action Plan, we call that ICAP. We have experience over the last 4 years. We kind of know what's working. We know what's working in other jurisdictions. We know what's not working. We know that some of the actions were real specific projects that we just don't feel like are the best use of our time. So we're applying that experience into thinking about how we update a number of those actions. We also knew there were a couple of areas we really wanted to hone in on. Our transportation and land use area, a lot of those actions actually related to updating the city's land use plan, which was completed a couple of years ago, a major overhaul was completed. And then the other area was natural systems. Our target in that area is around tree canopy. I don't think there are any actions in there that actually directly relate to increasing our tree canopy. And so we wanted to really hear from experts around how do we create some new action that actually have an impact on helping us make progress towards that target. And then the last area was there's a number of jurisdictions around us that are either in the process of updating their plans or recently completed. So there's a lot of work we can learn from in those neighboring jurisdictions. So tonight, what we'll hone in on are those natural systems, the actions within the natural systems focus area. As I mentioned, we have a target in that area, 55% tree canopy by 2035. We are at 51%. I think that's 2019 data, maybe our last study. And as mentioned, most of the actions within that area don't relate to increasing tree canopy. So we really want to make sure there's a stronger connection there. So diving in a little bit to the committee approach, in those areas I mentioned, natural systems, and then land use and transportation, because we wanted a deeper dive into those areas of the plans, we decided to form committees that were made up of board and commission members, staff representatives, and then the Snohomish tribe also participated in the natural systems work group or committee. The committee talked about their goals and objectives for updating the plan, talked a bit about current status of the actions. They looked at content from jurisdictions that our consultant had pulled together, and then provided some recommendations. This was done very quickly in 2 meetings, essentially over just a few hours. This is a snapshot of the committee members. We're really lucky to have 3 park board members. So David, Ryan, and then Martha participated. And I'll have David and Ryan jump in here in just a minute. They're little, yeah. So just wanted to briefly summarize, high picture, some of the feedback we heard from the committee, and then we'll dive in deeper. So one of the first topics they talked about and really started to hone in on was the potential to actually revise our tree canopy goal or target for the climate plan. That's probably one of the only targets that we're looking at revising. They felt that that 55% tree canopy target might not be feasible, and instead we should develop something that was around no net loss and maybe having the 55% target as a stretch goal. We probably won't dig into that too much tonight. We still need to have some additional staff conversations, but if you all have initial feedback, reactions tonight, we can definitely capture those and feedback probably in early 26 to dive in deeper.
So I have a question about that, and it's high level, it's almost philosophical, but considering our climate, increasing tree canopy at first glance, of course, sounds wonderful, and I'm all for the trees, but it also increases fuel. And we're starting to see more and more discussion about fires reaching the west side of the Cascades, and communities such as North Bend and Issaquah, other places being vulnerable because of the trees. How do you balance that in?
Yeah, that's a great question. Jeff has thoughts here. So that was quite an extensive discussion with the environmental board when we were talking about the tree code update, which I'm assuming this group may have touched on, maybe. Yeah, so that there, I think what Dan really talked about was tree canopy in the right places. And I think the tree code allows for those allowances for safe places or safe defense around the home, but that we could look at areas around the city that might not increase vulnerability to wildfire, but would still be beneficial in terms of the cooling and all the other benefits that the trees provide. I know Dan and team have also been looking into trees and other vegetation that might be more resilient to wildfire and help increase the community's resilience to wildfire too. But I don't know if there's other.
No, I would just say, I think it's another really, really important factor when thinking about what is an appropriate canopy goal. And as Stacy said, I think there's a lot more work in terms of, all right, is a revision due? And because there's some really important factors we need to think of, but wildfire risk is certainly one of them. So yeah, we certainly look forward to being part of that conversation. I think as Dan Hintz has come, and you've met Dan, our forest supervisor, he's come a couple of times. He works really, really closely with Stacy and team, and will be a big part of that conversation. Even as we're adding maybe tangible goals to the ICAP, we're doing a lot of tree work. We're doing a lot of tree planting. We're doing a lot of programs that may make sense to at least inform that ICAP and even understand at sustaining at 51%. There's a lot of tree work that needs to be done constantly, right? And Yeah, so I think it'll be a really, really good discussion, not only of a percentage goal, but even some degree of mapping or proximity or understanding where does canopy growth make sense? Where does limiting canopy, that's maybe not the right way to put it, but a lot of important factors.
Yeah.
And do you have responsibility for like the requirements for homeowners to have X number of trees like on their property? Because I know like if I wanted to take out a big tree on my property, if I wanted to ostensibly create defensible space, they would say, no, you can't take out those trees. You need to have this many trees on your property. Not that I would want to right now, but there's almost a shift in focus or thinking that needs to happen as the environment continues to change.
So that's the
Yeah.
regulatory, that's community planning and development. That was the
Okay, so
tree,
that's
that's the tree code.
Yeah.
In the city code. So the tree code update that just happened, is trying to factor in those pressures, concerns, realities as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I believe they did allow some allowance for wildfire, what trees that would be considered as hazardous for wildfire, but that tree code will be revisited again in 26, and I think that will be one of the big topics. But I think that's a great note, even in whether or not we change the tree canopy, making sure we're being really explicitly talking about those issues and concerns and canopy in the right places, and the resilience.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just a couple other things that were emphasized by the committee. They talked about drought preparedness, surface water conservation, native vegetation. There was a strong emphasis on expanding education efforts, environmental education efforts, particularly around native plant landscaping too. There were ideas around looking at blue carbon as a source for carbon accounting and wetland related planning. Really wanted to see improved partnerships with schools and underserved communities. There were conversations around invasive species removal to help increase resilience in our forests. And a lot of support for continuing the work on urban forestry. And again, just really emphasizing those partnerships to expand our efforts. So that's very high level about what they talked about. I'm going to see Brian and David, if you had other just perceptions coming out of the committee meetings, high level takeaways. These meetings were in April and June, so it's quite a long time.
Yeah, the one thing I would say that I really liked about it was the makeup of the committee was great, in terms of so many different people represented, even having, some of the native tribe folks. But also just the process that you went through. So I think we could also learn as we're going to Tibbetts Valley Park. It's not just sending out a survey and trying to digest and put intelligence around it. It was, okay, why do you think that? Why? Like just asking why, getting down to the actual nitty gritty of what should we change about this, or why do you think that way? So being able to kind of dive in and have those, I think it was like 3-hour meetings, but yeah, it was helpful and to see other people's perspective. Like, yes, that I fully agree with what they're saying. And that's the true root of the problem. Right. So yeah, that's what I really appreciated about sort of how we did it. The process was great. But
And I think, some of the takeaways I had, one, I'm on this park board, but I'm not an environmentalist or a climate action person. And so it was great to sit in there and hear all those different trains of thought, but bringing together that piece, and we've sat here and talked about canopy cover 3, 4, 5 times now, and healthy vegetation. What does a healthy forest look like? And what is it when you're the underbrush versus what it's supposed to be for what's native? Or there's a lot of stuff that I personally learned that I'm excited to even come back and talk to some of these things of how you lower the temperature of the city versus various things you're doing, or I think they call them rain gardens, just different ways you can, even as you're talking about getting buildings and planning and how you can find ways to potentially not lose the canopy, but find ways to maintain your canopy, but through other means that are, Dan's talked about, this be a 15-foot tree with a certain thing, with this certain things, various things like that, but I thought it was really cool, to be a part of, and, I came with a lot more questions than I had, answers to anything. Mine was kind of blown.
It was a hard group to compare to like the transportation group. There was a lot of transportation experts. Natural systems is so much. So I was right to say, you had park people there, you had forest people, you had our conservation, stormwater. So it was, there was a lot to cover. in that topic.
Our world. Right?
Exactly, yeah.
Public realm and public land needing to do so much.
Yeah.
Absolutely needing to do.
So that is kind of where I wanted to go next. So there's 3 areas wanted to touch on tonight. And again, I'm hoping this is kind of the first touch point to get some general reactions, and then we would come back possibly to hone in on that target as well as any policy questions. But wanted to hear from you all, the park board perspective, any reactions to what you heard from the very high level output of the committee meetings, or just your general feedback around priorities, the types of actions you want to make sure we are retaining or incorporating into the plan with this update. We have a few specific ideas that were proposed as kind of new for the climate plan, although some of them may live in other plans. So we wanted to talk through those for a few minutes. And then the last topic was around redundancy, and I put urban forest management plan, but there actually could be some redundancy with the park plan, especially if some of the new actions are considered. And kind of this question of what do we do if an action exists in 2 different plans? Is that okay? Do we need to have some kind of balance there? But I can talk through that a little bit more in a few minutes. So the last 2 meetings where I've done this, we've actually broken out into groups, but we decided we didn't have enough time to do that tonight, and it's a small enough group. So we'll just move into kind of a group conversation. But the first topic was really just around general feedback. Were there things that you heard from the high level summary of the committee meeting that really struck you and you want to make sure that we're capturing in the plan update? Are there other priorities that you have around the work this board is doing that intersect with climate action and resilience that you want to make sure are incorporating? So just any kind of initial takeaways, or as Tim was mentioning too, kind of concerns around wildfire and that increased canopy. To the next slide, just on that. That's it. Yeah, so just want to open it up to any general feedback, then we'll move into some of the more specific actions. Thoughts around priorities, concerns?
I'm glad to hear the focus on or the action item again on just invasive species. That's been something as I wander around the parks, it's always feeling like I'm protecting my dog from those things.
What are some of the, I don't have it off the top of mind, I don't have a laptop. For the greenhouse gas emissions, what were some of the other kind of actionable pieces of that plan? I know you mentioned the EVs and the 19 new chargers and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of the other areas, there's it's mostly on kind of mitigating our emissions. So that's easier to talk about, okay, transportation, building. So there's reducing energy use, changing the type of energy use we're getting for our buildings. Transportation, there's actions around changing how we get around town, using lower emitting options. When we get to natural systems, that's to where we've kind of struggled of what belongs in the climate plan and what might belong in other ways. So I think we can either think of natural systems in 2 ways. One is where we are supporting those systems or expanding the systems to exist because they are sequestering carbon and they're helping take in carbon, hence tree canopy, but they can also similar to tree canopy, but providing kind of resilience for our community. So they might be helping with cooling and shading, absorbing extra stream flow and water, for example. Another area, and this might be going beyond your question, but another area around natural systems we've been thinking about is how do we protect, and this gets a little bit to Connie's comment, and some topics that were discussed with the environmental board for the comprehensive plan update, is how do we expand what we mean by community to mean wildlife and the natural environment, and ensuring that expanded definition of community is resilient in the face of climate change. So how can we incorporate in actions that ensure our salmon are resilient to a changing climate? Or came up in one of our discussions with the committee where we were talking about dark sky ordinance, making sure the birds and the bugs are also resilient in the face of a changing climate. So natural systems is a little trickier, where the other areas of the plan, we can install EV chargers, we can track transit use and things like that.
Track trail connectivity.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Multimodal ways to get around town.
Yeah.
So something you just barely mentioned, and I'm wondering if it's more mentioned more in the plan in general, is about water. Because we live in an area that has mostly abundant water, as we saw this weekend. But, but we have real dry spells now. They didn't used to be as dry or as long as they are now. And so during those dry spells, anything, what do you do? Are you planting things that are going to have to be watered, and use more water when it really gets hot and dry? Or are you doing things that will actually, in the long run, conserve water? And I don't know the answer and how it all balances in, but I didn't hear a lot of mention of that, and I think it's an important aspect.
And one of the things we've discussed, and Stacy, please jump in as well, but the placement and use of drought tolerant vegetation throughout the park system, right? We've set a goal this year alone. It'll be interesting to see how close our metrics get at the end of the year, but we've set out to reduce irrigation use in the park system from 25 to 26 by a pretty significant percent. And so I think we've accomplished it. It'll be great to measure that and see. Yeah, what we plant, where we plant, how we plant, maybe, do we do some different things with some of these planting beds? All of that are certainly important to us operationally, and it feels like the committee and the ICAP, there could be some measurable, metrics about that. And I, for one, think there's value when multiple plans are talking about the same thing. And referencing the other, right? Not talking as if, hey, this is the only place this recommendation is, and it's an edict and it has to look exactly like this. But hey, this is a goal and priority within the park system plan that is also a goal and priority within the ICAP. I think that, where you have complementary plans that are referencing one another, I don't see that as a conflict. I see that as that's governance. That's local government. Local governance is balancing competing values and trade-offs and priorities.
Yeah, and I think to the water conservation, that did come up quite a bit on the committee. I may not emphasize it in the summary, but hopefully if folks were able to look at attachment A, which I have some hard copies of, there was quite a bit on water conservation, drought tolerant, and things. So I think that will definitely be something we emphasize more, because it's both resilience factor, making sure those places can withstand either really wet times or really dry times, but it's also mitigation where we're saving water for drought times, we're saving that energy use from all of the from watering and things like that. So I think, those are solutions that we'll probably see more of in this next version. Yeah, that's good.
Oh, yeah, we talked a lot about expanding community gardens.
Oh, yes. So we can, would it be easier just to jump? We can go into the next one and feel free to, if you have other thoughts. No, it's probably a little easier to dive in and respond to something than a bigger question. But these were a few of the new actions. These are, I will say these would be new for the ICAP. Some of these exist in the urban forest management plan, the park strategic plan. So, but we would think about how to shape them so they're complementary or kind of have the climate lens. But we could just walk through these and get initial reactions. So community gardens, there was discussion around that. My request, if this did move forward to the committee, was thinking about the climate lens of that. Is that kind of a community resilience piece by creating more local food, or what's the kind of climate piece? I would say that actually across all of these, and then similar for invasive. There was a lot of talk around invasive plants, but just thinking about what is that climate lens if we are creating actions like these. But yes, would love to get reactions around from the group on considering these for the climate plan update. We can start at the top, thoughts around community gardens. Yeah, I don't know how, can you refresh our memory on how the plans? Yeah, and the park strategic plan.
Yeah, we've talked about, within the park strategic plan goals for activating our public spaces. Specifically, where we can find opportunities to increase our community garden program. Right now, we have a community garden at Confluence Park. It would be very complimentary in that regard, and complements to what I was, pardon me for my soapboxing earlier, but taking a community park or a neighborhood park and creating space that's not so reliant on a scheduled game. A community garden is a great example, right? Where it's activated, people are coming and going. There's not a flow and a schedule. So certainly no. Say it again. How is it?
Yeah, like is it busy? Is it full? Are the plots also?
Busy. Plots are always full and we have a wait list. So I mean, even in terms of interest in the community, it's evident that finding somewhere else in the valley, where a community garden is put is really, really important, right? Are we doing it, if we're doing it on natural soil, what's the soil condition of that park and that space? And also just location in terms of complementary to the rest of the park. Is it a space that community plot renters are feeling comfortable in? And but yeah, it's certainly very complementary to things we've talked about. Improvements to the system, park system.
Dan, do you have a question, comment?
Oh, me? Yeah, I think I've commented on it before. I'm super in favor of the community gardens. I have a large garden at home myself, and I still like walking by Confluence Park to see what everyone else has done. I've heard from other members of the community that they either, wish they could get a plot. I guess there's a wait list, or that even if they're not gardening themselves, they like seeing the gardens that everyone has put up. So I love this idea.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Diana.
Yeah, and that's when we can work with Raman and the parks team to kind of align with what's in the park plan, and then in the ICAP have kind of the more climate lens around that.
What does this do for climate? Right. So you're right. There's a social benefit that, and that's the beautiful thing about some of these, and why I think having them in multiple plans is really important, because it might be coming, the primary benefit in one plan might be different, but speaking to multiple primary benefits is really important. That there should be a climate reason of doing something, but there's also a social community building reason you consider community gardens as well.
Is there much benefit to a community garden from a climate lens other than using this plot for something else that you deemed important?
Yeah, I think we can talk about the resilience aspect and access to local food is discussed a lot through community, or through the climate lens, but also, kind of the shorter distance that food's traveling as well.
Yeah, and I also would think community gardens are a great thing, especially if we have a waiting list. And it, so there's community interest. It's social. It's, like all the other side benefits of getting your food locally and not having to drive, and it doesn't be transported, and all of it. I think we should try to meet the community interest and need there.
Right, sounds like strong support for that. Invasive plant mapping and removal, a lot of discussion on this too. Dan was in the committee, so.
Dan.
Dan.
Yeah, so we could speak to, he was preaching green Issaquah.
Yeah. So there are actions within the urban forest management plan specific to invasive mapping and removal. One thing we talked about with the committee, again, is if we were to include this in the climate plan, focusing on that climate lens. So this would probably be around resilience and ensuring our natural areas are more resilient to the impact of climate change through the removal of invasives.
Healthy
As an
forest,
example,
right, healthy,
yes,
right.
so,
Yep.
but yes, would love, if there's other thoughts around this one as a priority for the park board.
Did you guys discuss, anything to help homeowners understand what's invasive or help them mitigate? I'm just curious if it came up at all.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I'll double check back on our committee notes unless it's in the attachment A, but I'll check on that. Is that something you'd wanna?
Yeah, I think it should just be something like, well, speaking of somebody whose previous owners planted that like ivy everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
English ivy.
Yeah, exactly. But like chokes out my tree, like it'd be nice to like, especially for new homeowners, like, here's what to look for, here's what to do about it. Like, I don't know, if there's.
Yeah.
That could be,
I'll make sure that's incorporated in.
and that could be a great way that, again, I know ICAP is looking at climate
Yeah.
lens, but, ample climate benefits to invasive plant removal and plant and management in the public space, but also private space. And maybe the ICAP can speak to private,
Here's what we recommend.
a little bit more,
Right.
you know what I mean? That, hey, here's what's happening in the public realm and efforts that you can help and why it's important. Why it's important to a canopy cover goal, right? And you can't achieve, we can't sustain a canopy cover goal without really thinking of invasive management, invasive removal. So that is quick to choke out canopy. Yeah.
Diana?
Yeah, so when I think about invasive species in like a climate context, we often see like the abundance of these invasive species as a symptom of climate change, right? Like species that are further south, making their incursion into more northern latitudes, or native species being displaced into more northern latitudes and higher elevations. So what's the plan, I guess, to kind of address these root causes where native species may not be thriving and may be displaced by invasive species where they're not getting the conditions to thrive?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if this will fully answer it, and probably Dan, his would be the one, but he has been looking at species migration, and through the update of kind of preferred tree lists and preferred species list, looking at what species will best survive under the changing climate. So that is something that is being considered, is maybe it's redefining kind of what becomes native versus an invasive, which might be impacting like goals towards our tree canopy, for example. But there are a lot of discussions in the climate and forestry world about kind of changing how we're defining kind of which species will best survive here based on that changing climate.
That's a great question. Great question and comment, Diana. In some ways, I think it blends it blends action 2 and action 3, right? How do we, due to that, new types of invasives are thriving because of climate change. How are, one way to prevent that is how are we proactively planting or thinking of what is native or the native migration to get ahead of that.
Yeah,
To combat it,
that's a great.
combat it proactively.
I believe that was addressed in the urban forest management plan, but I'll double check and we could do some cross-reference in the ICAP to that as we're talking about invasives and the tree canopy. Right, I know about 12 minutes.
Yes.
We have talked a bit about redundant, so, yeah, the next one I am interested on, there was discussion around having a policy for city, landscaping to be, for only native and drought tolerant. We do have a citywide code, around that. So I think this was to kind of go a step further and have the city be, more of a leader in that piece. I don't know if there's anything that was addressed in the park plan, but this is something we can explore if we saw this as a priority. I know, had some discussion with Robin about just wanting to be cautious of what we are setting in policy for the types of landscaping, because we'll need to have some flexibility.
Yeah, I think it warrants more discussion in terms of how, how do we look at a policy that can be operationalized and meet, again, the multitude of goals that this community has for its park system. And like I said, we're instituting, we set a goal to institute some irrigation reductions this year. So it's certainly a priority to us. But sometimes landscaping, these types of policies can, if they don't really think through the operational lens as well, can become, the pendulum can swing too far. Oh, wow, here comes an unintended consequence.
I think that if the environmental board is recommending moving something forward around that, we would bring that back to this group to make sure that we have the input from both boards moving forward. The other one, I think I referenced a little bit earlier, was there was desire from some members of the committee to look at dark sky ordinances. The city did incorporate quite a bit around dark sky objectives into the land use plan update. I think here the intent was for protecting migratory species in particular. And so one thing I had mentioned earlier was around we're considering some expansion of what we mean by community that would enable these types of actions to be incorporated in terms of community resilience for our broader wildlife community, along with human community, and ensuring that those other species can withstand more the impacts of climate change. So that's kind of where we would consider these types of
questions. One, how do we think about it impacting where we have lights?
I think that's a great question and leads to what.
I was gonna say safety.
Yep.
Yeah, this is again competing, public spaces from a SEPTED standpoint, a sort of crime prevention through design approach to public spaces. People want to feel safe. They want to feel they're going to go to public spaces where they feel safe, and so where lighting is important, but we want to make sure an ordinance understands the goals of how that public space is used, whether through pedestrian lighting, ball field lighting, right? And understanding that balance of I bring up ball fields as again this reality of, as a really land constrained city, lighting athletic fields allows us to build less ball fields. Right, so, that's where it's great. These conversations are really, really important. So we're looking at both community perspective, but even operational perspective. How are,
I would say that one makes me the most nervous as a board member of all of these.
so ordinances that I've seen are, making sure all lights are shielded, all lights are,
Which we do have that.
that's currently that's currently a requirement in the recent Title 18 update. So, yeah, we too as staff will want it,
Right,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say that I don't think we should have anything, I just don't wanna
enjoy, right?
That's why we need to hear from multiple boards and commissions and staff. We compile all the input. All right. Are you all on time? Do you want me to start?
How long is your director's report?
No.
I'm not gonna, no director's report tonight.
Okay. Great. Why don't we go through these last two and then I can kind of summarize the redundancy conversation. I think Jeff's had some good input, a little bit of input from others. So, other priorities we heard from a committee for new actions around native plant and pollinator gardens. Again, I was encouraging what's the climate lens here. I think this was kind of a climate resilience and increasing habitat for species that could be more impacted from some of the impacts we're seeing from climate change. I don't know if this has come up in park board discussion in terms of
Specific pollinator gardens, it hasn't been a.
Native plants have been a topic, but not
Absolutely.
specifically.
Something Dan and I have been starting to talk about
okay.
to increase that habitat in
Yeah.
new parks.
Are there enough native pollinators that you don't think you can just use native pollinators to put where you want pollinator gardens?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think so. And I think of, I don't know if it's technically a pollinator garden, but that garden next to the community garden at Confluence.
Yes.
Has all the flower, or at least seasonally has the flower. That's kind of what I think was maybe envisioned here, was having more of those
Exactly.
spaces around the city.
Yeah.
And then the last one, maybe a little outside of the park board realm, but maybe not. The group did talk about improving stream health through reducing pollutants. You could draw a climate lens here, but just wanted to, it's a little bit maybe more of a stretch than some of the actions we'd be considering in the plan. But wanted to see how much that is a priority of the park board, if that comes up in your discussions, in terms of just looking at stream health.
And I don't think we've looked at it so much as a pollutant reduction as we've talked about stream health in terms of as we've been, like, you just look at like the history of Confluence all the way from that stream, the next like 500 feet and everything that's been worked on slowly ever since. I think we've talked more about it in that sense as you're redesigning, rebuilding, repairing, is looking to improve riparian stuff and stream health, but not necessarily through the climate lens, but more of a health of the stream, which is, you can.
Yeah.
I think this is complementary and in the multiple benefits of improving stream health, right? Lots of the goals and policies within the park system plan talk about strategic acquisitions along Creekside, right? The value of preservation of those for multiple purposes and multiple, riparian health, but also recreational corridors, right? So I love the idea of multiple plans speaking to a goal, but then saying, hey, this goal is important for this reason,
Right.
for this reason, for this, right? It's for climate and for social. It's for transportation because if we're giving alternate ways for people to get around town, but doing it in a way that reduces pollutants and improves the riparian area. So I think we haven't talked about it through a climate lens, but we've certainly talked about the value of those corridors and their health, their environmental health.
Right. Well, I think we can probably skip over redundancy. Heard a lot from Jeff on redundancy, but I think that's consistent though, with what we've been starting to hear in the conversations we're having. Well, the issue we were dealing with is that there is at least one action in the plan, potentially more if we look at some of the new actions, that the language is slightly different than what exists in other plans. And so trying to figure out, well, which action are you reporting on? What if it changes significantly in a plan? Which plan kind of has priority? A lot of the feedback that we've heard that I think Jeff was emphasizing tonight is redundancy is good. We want to see these actions in other plans, but probably how we'll approach them in the ICAP is making sure it is that climate lens in the action, where right now it's just kind of slightly different wording in the language. But if there is anything that we're looking at removing or changing significantly that overlaps with the work the park board does, we'll make sure to inform you of that. So in terms of next steps, what we are doing is taking the input that we're getting from you all and other boards and commissions. We'll be using that to revise and propose revisions that will be going through the environmental board. And then I think what I'll probably do is work with Robin and Jeff and Santhi to come back in early 26, where we can dive a little bit deeper into the canopy target and discuss any proposed revisions to that. And then if there are any policy related actions that overlap with your work, we'll really want to make sure to get feedback on those before we take anything to council, so that they can weigh the input from the different boards and commissions.
That's a great idea, coming back, Stacy. If I can add, a conversation like it's an important one, like canopy cover, could be a great candidate for a joint meeting.
Yes.
Park board, environmental board, and again, for these really important perspectives of residents to talk through all these key variables to be thinking of canopy cover.
Yep.
Could be really healthy discussion.
Well, that is it. And I would say too, if you have any feedback on the attachment, that was much deeper dive into the committee recommendations, some staff reflection, feel free to email me, send it to Robin, she can forward it to me. But yeah, we're continuing to take update as we move through this process. We'll be starting to go to council probably late spring, so we still have quite a bit of time. But thank you. Great feedback tonight. Really appreciate all the input.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your Stacy.
Thank you.
With that, we'll go to the director's report, which has been reported that there is none.
A lot going on. One report, Hasanthi is coming back. She'll be back on Monday, next Monday. So look forward, I know Hasanthi looks forward to jumping back into park board and seeing you all at the November meeting.
Very cool. Chairperson report. I just have a couple things. Just to get on a quick tangent, as tomorrow's the last day to sign up for your free tree. And then if you do get a free tree, Dan will be teaching you how to plant it and take care of it on Saturday the 1st at Confluence Park. And then my high horse for the day is get out and vote on Tuesday. There is a lot of things going on in our community. There are a lot of people in positions and bills and sponsored things up for your vote. And no matter how you vote, just please get out and vote. And does anybody have anything else they'd like to cover? Yes.
Have people been to the intersection of Gilman and Rainy Near Trail? It's all done in 3 days.
Yes, has anyone seen the audit?
Yeah, it looks great, right?
Yeah.
I just want to say that looks good. It was fun to plan that, fun to see it come and get executed. It's a fun one because it was fast.
It's fast. It's fun.
Yeah, talked about it, and executed, but I'm like, oh.
It's there,
It's
and that's,
there, yeah.
that's chapter one. Chapter two is going to be, we're still working with Public Works and timing we're gonna have colored, we're gonna have striped crossings as well, yeah, for the all way, yeah.
Yeah, and just a little kudos, despite all the rain we had this weekend, the drainage system at Hillside Park worked really well.
Excellent, good to know.
That was a good test. Yeah, I think
Good test.
Very easy of a test. That's great to
Oh,
hear.
good. Yeah.
Excellent. I know we don't have youth representative as well. Maybe we'll look forward to that in the future. And then the next meeting, as you noted, is November 24th, and we will not have a December meeting with you. So unless anyone has anything further online.
I think the discussion on both topics tonight. We're good.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Had a few teams notes, but I didn't get called away into the council meeting. Right? Yeah, so far so good. Yeah.
First, session.
Say that again.
This is the first of. discussions.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yes, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.